Likkutei Torah, Parshat Behar, page Mem, bottom of the first column, Ois Beis. Okay, the Rabbi started off the Maimah by asking a question that the pasuk says when you come to the land, the first thing the Torah says you're going to have Shemitah. When Likkutei, that's not the order. The order is first you have 6 years and then you have Shemitah. So the Rabbi started introducing the concept of Pischuli Achesi Rayosi, and he explains what is Achesi, my sister, which represents a natural instinctive love. And Achesi also comes in the word of weaving two parts together that it becomes one. So he says that there's a natural instinctive love, but if the love isn't constant, and like by tzaddikim it's continuous, so then it's real. Otherwise it's not real. If it comes during davening and after davening checks out, so then it's not really real. It was called emes meeting. And he says, why is that? Because then the person gets involved with the Yetzirah of Shabbamis, with worldly things, so therefore it darkens, it covers this love that a person is supposed to have. So he says, what's the avoid of Achesi? Achesi, the Hashem says, open up a little bit. Even you come to purify yourself, I will help you. You open up like an eye of a needle, I'll open up like the doorway of the ulam. So he says, and through this, the last thing he said, we come to the level of Rayosi. So he says, in Rayosi, to understand what Rayosi means, what Chazal tell us, Yisrael mefanis and lavim shebeshemayim. The Yidden give sustenance to Hashem, which itself is very difficult, but like we learned, all those things. Except, but it says in the pasuk, there will never be anybody lost from you completely. It says, from Hashem nobody will ever be lost. Which means, to hug in the body of the king. So he says, to understand, how is it possible that a neshama shebechinas nivra yesh v'dav b'fnei atzmi? How is it possible that a neshama, which is created yesh mi'ayin, it's in a body, it's in a tangible physical world, how is it possible that it could become l'shtabah b'guf of the malka, to hug and become one with the king? How is it possible that a creation, which is by definition yesh mi'ayin, is not completely bottled? How in the world can that come to become one with Hashem? The Zohar says, three things are bound together, three knots are tied together. Torah with Hashem, Yisrael and Jews with Hashem. The Zohar has an expression, there's three knots that are tied one to another. Hashem to Torah and Torah to the Jews. Okay? But so the Rebbe asks, it's only two knots. If you have three things, one is tied to two and two is tied to three. So that's only two knots. But the Zohar says, that there's three knots. So Chassidus explained because the third, one to two and two to three, and then now three is tied with one. So it's basically a circle. No, it brings out a closer unity between all three things. That all three things are mamish like a circle, they're interconnected. Why? Because down here, at least, Torah is greater than the neshamas of a yid. Because Torah comes from the level of chachma. What Chazal tell us, fortunate is the one that comes here, because that means fortunate is the neshama that has Torah. So here the Alter Rebbe is saying like this. Down here basically, because the Alter Rebbe asks really the same question in Tanya. He alludes to it in Tanya. Down here, the neshama is not as great as Torah. And the proof of it is, Torah can never become tamei. The Gemara learns out from a pasuk, and my word's not like fire. The Gemara says, just like fire can never become tamei, so Torah can never become tamei. A neshama, on the other hand, The pasuk says nefesh kisechta, a nefesh sins. That means it's possible that a nefesh could become tamei. So down here he's saying Torah is greater than the neshama. Ach lahaven zasher Torah gam kim lubesh, but the Torah, how could we say Torah is greater than the neshama? Because the neshama is in gashmius and Torah isn't. Halei Torah gam kim lubesh es binyanim gashmi. Torah also comes into physical things. There's tzitzis, v'tfilin, v'sukkah. There's physical objects. You have tzitzah, wool, and parchment, and sukkah, v'kamen, v'mammas, v'tainis. And there's many aspects of monetary things. And, arguments, litigation between people. And not only that, sometimes they're lying. So it's mamish. Torah is talking about lies. So Torah is really coming into the low gashmistic thing. But so how do you have Torah in Gan Eden? We know there's something called Mesivta the Rakia. There's this heavenly yeshiva, which is one of the Gan Edens. So the question is, how do they learn Torah in Gan Eden? So he says, Achine ksiv, l'chol lachmu b'lachmi. Torah is like into lechem, k'mei halechem mazin gashmi. Just like bread, it's physical food. Sha'olav yichya ha'adam chaye gufay. The person lives physically, a person lives from physical bread. How? It becomes absorbed in the limbs of the person. How do you, like we learned yesterday, you can't put bread on your stomach and get full. You have to digest it. It goes into your blood system, and that's what gives life to the person. So the same thing, Torah, which is spiritual food, also has to become, just like physical food needs to become absorbed in the physical limbs, spiritual bread needs to become absorbed in the spiritual limbs of the nefesh. And through this, nefesh toshiv al Hashem, a nefesh is able to return to Hashem, go for the malch, to become absorbed, so to speak, hugged in the body of the king, for the malchus mamish, to become one with Hashem himself. So he says like this: how is it possible that the person becomes one with Hashem? So it's through Torah. Why? Torah is food. What is the concept of food? Just like physical food becomes absorbed in the physical body, so spiritual food, Torah, becomes absorbed in the spiritual part of the person, which is the neshama. So when a person learns Torah, that feeds the neshama, that it should be able to become one with Hashem. So in other words, down here, because the neshama becomes absorbed in the body and is able to become tamei, the only way a neshama down here could be connected to Hashem is through Torah. In other words, even though Torah is one with Hashem and the neshama is one with Hashem, so the question, why does the neshama need Torah to connect it to Hashem if it's also part of Hashem, just like Torah is? But the difference is, Torah coming down here remains in the pure state. Neshama coming down here could sin, could become impure. So therefore, the whole pshat is, in order for the neshama down here to become able to become absorbed in godliness, it needs the Torah. And that's why it says, L'chu lachmo b'lachmi. Lachmai, which is lechem umazim. Livari be'vari nafshechem, to become absorbed in the limbs of the person. Lachakach lachmi, and then it becomes Hashem's bread. Okay, so this is the concept of, he's explaining now what Rayasi means. And he says, Yidden give Hashem parnasa. Now what does it mean Hashem gives a Yidden parnasa? So he explains that the neshama, when they learn Torah down here, that causes godliness to become absorbed and the neshama to become one with Hashem, and that becomes Hashem's bread, kaviyachol, that keeps Hashem here in the world. So who sustains Hashem, meaning, not God forbid he needs it, but in order to keep Hashem in the world, give Hashem parnasa, that the person could, so to speak, let's say by a person. Parnasa means you can live. So Hashem to live in the world, that's only done through the Yid. And he says like this, V'nei ba'avis malachas shel Shabbos, in the primary 39 avis which are forbidden on Shabbos, the Gemara says, Sidure the pasnoket. It says the malachas, the first bunch of malachas, are based on the process of food. Meaning plowing, planting, all the various different things. Kedei lasis lechem. Because in order for there to be bread, roy l'mayachal adam, to be fit for the fruit of a person, achiyaniv lebeivodav, that it should become absorbed in the person's body, v'shava kipsari, and become, alive. So the primary malachas of food, by the way, bread doesn't only mean bread. Bread means all of food. It says like this, in the Mlamites Malachas, there are more detailed ones, but the four, and his Alter Rebbe is going to explain them spiritually, for the spiritual bread. But in bread there's four main processes. There's planting, grinding, kneading, and baking. That's basically what you need. Yeah, there's plowing, but there's four primary things: planting, grinding, kneading, and baking. But in order to understand, because this is how we make the spiritual bread, which is Torah. So he said, in order to understand how these things look b'avedus Hashem, we need to explain in detail physical planting, okay? Then we can understand the way it is in Ruchnius. Because, as follows. Gashmius comes from Ruchnius. Gashmius comes from Ruchnius. So anything that exists in the Gashmistic world, we need to understand the way it is in Ruchnius. Or rather, by understanding it in Gashmius, then we can understand the way it is in Ruchnius. We mentioned many times, the way the story goes is, when the Rebbe Rashab would wash for bread, he didn't want to be interrupted until he actually made a maitzi. He didn't want any, But one time, the Rebbe Rashab had a younger brother whose name was Reb Mendel, and he came over to the Rebbe Rashab. He was super excited. So after he made a maitzi, he told the Rebbe Rashab that they just found out, the doctors just found out, that there's a certain vein in the brain that if you want to remember something, you look up. And if you want to delve deeply into something, you look down. People want to meditate, you delve deeply, you look down. You remember, you look up. That's the vein like that. So he came with this wondrous discovery in the medical world. So the Rebbe Rashab told his brother, go to the bookcase over there. He told him exactly which bookcase. He told him which sefer to pull out, which was Maimorim of the Mittel Rebbe, that lived like 100 years before him, or whatever. He opens it up, and he sees in the Maimor, it says that there's a vein in the brain that when you look up, it helps to memory, and when you look down, it helps to go deeper. And then he said like this, don't think, so he told him, this is old stuff already, it's brought down in Chassidus. So he said, don't think the Mittel Rebbe was a doctor. He wasn't. But the Mittel Rebbe knew the way it was in the heavenly spheres. So he understood in the like, because up there, just like a person is a kema shlema, a full height thing, whatever, there's a head and a body. So he understood in Ruchnius, he saw that there's an union like that. And because it's like that in Ruchnius, because of that, it comes on like that in Gashmius. So in order to understand the concept of bread in a ruchniistic way, we can understand it first by understanding Gashmius. And then we can understand how it is in Ruchnius. Really, it begins from Ruchnius and then comes to Gashmius. But we're Gashmi, so we need to understand it in the Gashmiistic way, and then we can understand it in Ruchnius. So he says like this, Al derech moshul shezer in garden chita. When you plant a seed of wheat, or nate in garden peri ba'aretz, or you plant a fruit, whatever. You plant seeds in the ground, whether it's food or fruits. U'mechasim ba'afer, then you cover it with dirt. V'agaden ahu nirke v'nifsed. Then it becomes, the seed germinates, it's called in English, it rots. Then the power of vegetation that Hashem put into the earth, matzmiach chita, makes the chita grow, the wheat grow, or peri, or fruit, keina garden anizra, similar to the seed that was planted. If you plant a wheat seed, it's not going to grow barley. So in other words, even though look at the seed, it doesn't look like wheat, it doesn't taste like wheat, it's nothing like wheat. But in the wheat, which germinates, and then it becomes united with the koyach hatzameach of the earth, so then out comes wheat or a tree or whatever. Why? Because this power of vegetation that exists in the world, koyach kloli, is a general power, that it makes grow this particular thing. In other words, in the same ground, you could take a wheat seed and wheat will grow. You could take a fruit tree seed and it will also grow. So the question is, how could the same earth make a tree grow and wheat grow? So the answer is, the power of vegetation, that Hashem said, Tachi oretz desha, that the earth should sprout out vegetation, that is a general koyach. It's a general power. Like a battery, right? A battery is a general power. You put it into this toy, it does this. You put it into this, it goes. So then the koyach hatzmeach is a general power to make things grow. So when it's this wheat, it grows wheat. When it grows barley, barley, a tree. Is awakening from below of the seed to the koyach hatzmeach latzmiach koyach prati, to grow an individual fruit, similar to that particular seed, right? So that's what happens. You plant it in the ground. You have to first, he doesn't say it, but you have to grind, you have to plow, you have to loosen the earth, then you have to put the seed, and then you have to cover it again with the ground, he's saying, and then it germinates, it rots, and then it becomes one with the koyach hatzmeach ba'aretz. That particular seed, where did that seed come from? It also came from the earth, from the previous wheat. And it has therefore the power of to grow in a concealed form. But it's not anymore. It became much more physical, that it becomes a seed. In other words, where does this seed get the power to grow? So the answer is because it comes from the ground, which has in it the power Hashem put into it, the things to grow. So potentially, this seed has the power of earth in it. That's why when you plant it in the ground, it's going to make things grow. Lefiko, therefore, when it rots and it becomes the ruined, the gufa garden, therefore, like this, the power of vegetation that's in this seed rots, meaning it becomes bottle, and therefore it unites with the general power of growth in the earth. Means that the becomes an awakening from below, and therefore it grows garden, similar to the seed, much more than the principle. Right? The principle is a little seed. Out comes big tree or wheat or whatever it is. So he says like this: the same thing, the different seeds grow all these various different types of fruits, different tastes, and different colors, meaning, if it would be apple seed, it would grow matzmiach tapuchim. If it was a grape seed, anavim, it would grow on anavim k'yetziben. Okay, and so he says like this: Hagam shebegadinahu. Even though when you look at this apple seed, ein a nirv and nirgish shum tam v'derech klal. There's no taste. Eat it, bite into an apple seed. You're not going to have any taste of an apple. It doesn't have the color of an apple. It has nothing. It's only like a piece of wood. It's tasteless. It has the essence of the fruit in the potential. In that potential of the seed, it has concealed within it. It has all the taste and the color and the smell of that particular fruit. But in the seed, it's so limited. It has no taste or smell. It's so concealed in it that you can't tell anything from it. And therefore, it's able to draw from the ground this power of vegetation. In other words, like this: because this seed has in its potential the whole apple with everything in it, taste, color, whatever, so therefore, because it becomes bottled to the ground, it's able to become part of the ground's power, and therefore with the power of the ground in this particular seed, it's now able to come out in the open a tree which is similar to the apple seed, or a wheat seed, or a grape seed, or whatever. So he says, what is the level of planting? The first level of planting in the 4 levels, he says, it has to be put into the ground, which itself is bittul, ground is bittul. It germinates, meaning it becomes bottled to the power in the ground, because it has the potential within it, because it came from the ground. So it still has the potential in it of all the powers of the apple. And then now when you plant it in the ground and it becomes one with the power of the vegetation, so then out comes an apple. If you think about it, it's called Mother Nature, but this is mamash a miracle. I mean, think about it. Take a seed that doesn't look or taste anything like an apple, you put it in the ground, it rots, and then out comes a big apple tree. I mean, by us, it's, you plant tomatoes, you get tomatoes. You plant cucumbers, you're going to get cucumbers. But if you think about it, it's an unbelievable miracle. But it's so common, like we learned many times, a common miracle is called nature. But it's really an unbelievable miracle. And by the way, this is another interesting thing that Chassidus brings down. There's an expression always in Chassidus, from yesh to yesh, has to be an ayin in the middle. Because one yesh is defined as that yesh. Now you want to make another yesh, which is different than the first yesh. Because everything is... So how can yesh become yesh that's only through an ayin in the middle? Because it has that bittul, then one yesh can become a second yesh. But if the yesh, the first yesh, still stays its own yesh, they can never become another yesh, because it's identified what it is. It can't become something else. And that's why this explains how Chassidus gives us, for this a mashal. The Gemara says Rab Zera first lived in Bavel, and then he moved to Eretz Yisrael. So you find in the Gemara where it says Rav Zera, and sometimes Rabbi Zera. So Rav Zera was what he said when he was in Bavel. And when he moved to Eretz Yisrael, the halachas he said was called Rabbi Zera. Because in Eretz Yisrael they're called Rabbi, and Chutz La'aretz they're called, in Bavel they were called Rav. So the Gemara says, 2 different versions, whether he fasted 40 fasts or 100 fasts. He should forget Talmud Bavli, that in order to learn Talmud Yerushalmi. No, he actually forgot. He fasted that he should forget Talmud Bavli to learn Talmud Yerushalmi. And everybody always like, oh, how could that? Knowing Bavli should help. Knowledge helps their knowledge, not it doesn't get in the way. So why did he have to fast to forget Talmud Bavli? But now, in our generation, Hashem reveals certain things to make things clear, because before Mashiach. Because the bottom line is, one style of learning, Yerushalmi and Bavli were completely different styles of learning. One way of braining, of using your brain, got in the way of the other way of brains. Which means like this. I think your phone is ringing. Or something, I don't know. Where do you see this clear nowadays? Little kids catch on to all these new, technological things. In a second, the kid will figure out the phones and the computers and the new stuff. Even 10-year-olds know better now than the 25-year-olds. In a second, they figure it out. So, like, why is that? They're not that they're smarter. Okay, on the contrary, a 25-year-old, a 50-year-old, they have much more knowledge. The answer is like this. My generation, our brains are wired a certain way of thinking. We're wired a certain way of thinking. This new way of thinking, of technology, which is a completely new way of thinking, we're not used to it. We're wired a different way. Our wiring a different way gets in the way of this different type of wiring, because it's a completely different way of thinking. So kids, they're not wired yet, they're still being molded. So they can pick it up in a second because they were never molded differently. Okay, by us, old school in technology gets in the way of new schooling because it's a whole different way of thinking. So in order to have yesh miyesh, you need to have ayin b'emtza. So the same thing, this seed that has all the potential in it, in order for it to come an apple tree, it has to germinate, it has to rot in the ground to become ayin, to create from the yesh of the seed the actual apple. But it has to become in a way of complete bittul. Because yesh miyesh needs an ayin b'emtza. Therefore it says in Chassidus that even when the neshama, says in Kabbalah that when the neshama, let's say in a yortzeit, the neshama goes up from level to level, so the neshama needs to go in the Har Dinur. It's a fiery mikvah up there. It's called Nar Dinur. It's a spiritual mikvah that the neshama has to go through from one level of Gan Eden to a higher level of Gan Eden. Why does it have to go to the mikvah in the middle? Because the higher level of Gan Eden is a contradiction to the lower level of Gan Eden. So in order to go to that higher level, you need bittul. And tefillah's letter is bittul. You go into the mikveh, you submerge yourself completely in the water, you're bittul. Right? Tefillah and bittul are the same letters. So you need to have the level of that ayin b'emtza. So the same thing is really by a seed. You have the seed, it has potential in it, but again, it's going to get in the way of the apple tree. So it has to rot, and then it becomes the apple tree. Here.